Hello, my name is Marie Archbold and I'm from the EPA Catchments Unit. I'd like to thank the committee for the invitation to speak here today. My presentation today is on the scientific evidence base underpinning the third Cycle River Basin Management Plan, which runs from 2022 to 2027. This slide gives an overview of the River Basin Management Plan process. It's a 6-year cycle and we're currently coming to the end of the second cycle and starting the third cycle in 2022. So in terms of the cycle, the EPA are responsible for a number of components. The first component really is monitoring and undertaking our status assessments. And this allows us to look at the progress of the plans and the outcomes achieved. We then, where we identify that there is problems, we then have to assess what's causing these problems and how we fix them, and what actions and measures are required. And then that allows us to consider the environmental objectives. When we talk about environmental objectives, we talk about the achievement of at least good status in all our water bodies. And we assist the department in doing a technical assessment of the environmental objectives before they're signed off by the Minister. We also are responsible for reporting to the Commission, for the provision of the public information through catchments.ie, and also for assisting the Minister and the Department of Housing with the programme of measures and then tracking the progress of the implementation of the programme of measures. So just to give an overview of the current ecological status, which was from 2013 to 2018, and we see that there are significant problems. For example, 47% of our rivers and 62% of our estuaries are unsatisfactory. Problems are widespread. You can see that in our graph going across that and our graph here, in that we can see a decline in our high status water bodies, and we also can see an increase in our poor status water bodies. This is just the ecological status for 2016-2018 shown in a little bit more detail. So you can straight away see here that rivers, lakes and transitional water bodies, our estuaries and our lagoons, they're far from achieving their environmental objective of achieving at least good status in all water bodies. So really we need to ask ourselves, and in terms of the characterisation assessment, where are these problems, what are causing these problems, and how do we fix these problems? So in terms of the characterisation assessment, the first thing we do is we look at the risk of a water body of not achieving its environmental objective of good or high status. So in this assessment we compare Cycle 2 and Cycle 3, and you can see that in Cycle 2, in comparison to Cycle 3, we're having in our at-risk water bodies, in Cycle 3, we see a significant increase in the number of water bodies that are at risk. The number of water bodies in review in between Cycle 2 and Cycle 3 are largely the same. And in terms of the not at risk category, we see that we have a lot less water bodies in Cycle 3 in comparison to Cycle 2. And that makes sense given that primarily the at-risk water bodies increase in Cycle 3 is offset by the decrease in not at-risk water bodies for Cycle 3. So then we need to consider, well, we know where the problems are, and now it's what's causing those problems. So when we talk about good status objective water bodies, it's very clear that nutrients is the dominant problem, phosphorus and nitrogen, and then this is followed by morphology and followed by organic pollution. When we talk about organic pollution, we're talking about ammonia and BOD, for example. Now, in terms of the high status objective water bodies, it's a little bit different in that morphology, physical alterations, are the primary impact in these water bodies. This is followed by excess nutrients and then followed by hydrology, that is the flow in the rivers. So in terms of looking then we've seen that nutrients are a problem, especially in our good status objective water bodies. And this is just taken from the Water Quality in Ireland 2013 to 2018 report. And we can see here the red means there's been a decline in nutrients, in phosphorus in this example, or nitrogen in this example. Yellow means it's stable since the last reporting period, and blue means there has been a decrease in the trend, so there has been an improvement in the trend. I suppose just to look at this, and in particular in relation to the red dots, for nitrogen in particular, we do see a considerable amount of red dots appearing, particularly in the south and the southeast of the country. And as you can see, there's not many blue dots appearing, there's not many improvements. There's more improvements in relation to phosphorus, but again we can see a significant number of red dots, meaning there has been a further deterioration in those nutrient concentrations. Then we also have this graph, and you can see the blue line is for herd size, the black line is for fertiliser sales of nitrogen, and the mustard bar is for monitored N emissions to water. And what we can see here is since 2012 really, we started to see an increase in or a strong correlation I should say, in between the monitored N emissions to water, fertiliser nitrogen sales and herd size. So when we come on then to looking at the third cycle significant pressures, we've broken them down into the pressure types along this axis here, and we talk about the number of water bodies impacted by each pressure type along this axis. And you can see the different water body types broken down along here. So straight away you can see by far agriculture is the most dominant or the significant pressure in impacting our water bodies. This is followed by hydromorphology, forestry, urban wastewater, urban runoff, domestic wastewater, and the unknown represents where we do not have sufficient evidence base to say exactly what's impacting on a water body. The other category covers a multitude of categories including waste, aquaculture, abstractions, contaminated land and water treatment. Then we have peat, industry and finally mines and quarries. So to give an overview then, we look at the breakdown in between the second cycle and the third cycle, and we see that there has been a significant increase from 777 water bodies impacted by agriculture in the second cycle to now 1,000 water bodies impacted by agriculture. We also see an increase in hydromorphology, in domestic wastewater and in urban runoff. Now, just to highlight that in these three, we would say that the increase in those pressures is largely due to the increase in our evidence base, the improvements in our evidence base and the tools that we're using to assess these. However, agriculture is different because the tools we used in the second cycle are predominantly the same as the tools we used in the third cycle. So therefore, this is more a genuine increase in actual pressure type as opposed to the other pressures. We've also seen decreases primarily in urban wastewater and some in peat and in industry as well. So with this information then, we're able to plot up where exactly we need measures to target the various nutrient issues when we split them out. We usually think about phosphorus and sediment together, because when we talk about phosphorus and sediment, we talk about breaking the pathway measures. So example, and also these provide co-benefits for biodiversity. So when we talk about break the pathway measures, we're talking about measures such as settlement ponds for phosphorus and sediment, riparian zones, that forestry, hedgerows that actually break that pathway of that phosphorus or sediment flow from the land down into the river. When we talk about nitrogen loss, we have to deal with it and nitrogen impact and nitrogen measures. Nitrogen measures need to target the source because nitrogen travels predominantly via the subsurface pathways. So you can see straight away that to understand what measures are needed, we need to fully understand what's impacting on our water bodies. So in this case, we've mapped where the dominant nutrient pressures are. The blue represents the phosphorus and sediment measures where they're needed, and then the mustard represents where the nitrogen measures are needed. And where we see a hatching, that means that measures are required for both phosphorus, sediment and nitrogen. So, and this allows us then, this is all about really focusing the right measure in the right place. Okay, so this slide shows draft results for nitrogen load reductions in catchments. The map here shows the catchments where N load reductions are required in the east, southeast and south of the country. The darker the colour, the larger the reduction in the load of N going to the estuary is required. And the legend here, up here, shows the range of tonnes of nitrogen per year reduction that is required. So we see here 0 to 100 tonnes per nitrogen year reduction is required where it's yellow. Then this ranges up to a load reduction of 2,000 to 5,000 tonnes of nitrogen per year load reduction in the water is required if in this scenario here. Although the assessment is based on the track threshold of 2.6 milligrams per litre, the measures need to be applied back up into the catchment, and measures should target both surface water and groundwater receptors where appropriate. Now over here, the graph shows the dominant source of N loading in the 12 catchments. So we see here that pasture is the blue colour, the red colour represents arable, the green colour represents urban wastewater, and the purple colour is for other. And then what we see here is that with the exception of the Tolka Liffey estuary, pasture followed by arable land use is the dominant N source in these catchments, and that's where measures need to be targeted at. Okay, this slide shows the pollution impact potential map, or PIP map, for nitrate. So essentially this map is a critical source area map for nitrogen contribution to our surface waters. This map has been developed using information on bedrock, subsoils, soils to give us the hydrogeological susceptibility, and this is overlaid with information from the Department of Ag on land use nutrient loading. And also we have had input on the end cycle component of this map from Chagas. Then we also have a similar map for phosphorus. So in terms of both the nitrate and the phosphorus maps, the darker the colours, the higher the risk of nutrient loss to the adjacent stream or river. So in this case, the darker the purple colours, and in this case, the darker the blue colours, is where measures should be targeted. In terms of recent updates to the phosphorus maps, we've not only, and the nitrate PIP maps, we've not only updated them with the 2018 loading information, LIPIS information and AIMS information from the Department of Ag, but the phosphorus maps have also been updated with information on elevation. And this information was undertaken and researched as part of a research project funded by the EPA and undertaken by UCD, and that was called the EPA Diffuse Tools Project. So in terms, just to give you an overview of what this new version of this phosphorus PIP map is, this is the phosphorus PIP map here. The darker blue areas indicate the critical source area, and this is where the source and the land, where there is a source and where the land is susceptible. And this is typically in areas with a high PIP rank of 1, 2 or 3, and it's usually due to the presence of poorly draining soils and moderate to high intensity livestock. And really what these darker areas mean is that you need to target, if there's an issue there with phosphorus, you need to target these critical source areas if agriculture is a significant pressure. Now, on top of that, the new versions of these maps now have flow paths along them, so you can see where the flow of water comes along them. But these must be used in conjunction with the PIP map underlying it. For example, in this green area, you wouldn't want to target areas around along this flow, or measures along this flow path, as this is essentially a low risk area, where this darker blue area, it's a high PIP rank area, and you'd target your measures along the flow path. The darker, the red colour is high flow path coming down along, as opposed to the yellow being a moderate or medium flow path. So again, it's about targeting the right measure in the right place. Within these high PIP areas, you can focus further by actually targeting in the measures along these flow paths. Then also we have these red dots, and these are a new addition, and they're the focus flow delivery zones or points along the actual river or stream channel. And this is where the flow path actually enters the water course, and the size of the point indicates the relevant volume of flow delivered to the water along here. So again, it's about how you target measures, and again, by targeting areas into these the zones or points, it means that measures such as woodlands, engineered ditches, riparian buffer zones, settlements, ponds, it means that straight away you're getting a much clearer or a much targeted measure, targeting the actual point of contribution to the river. So these maps then help us target where the measures for phosphorus are needed. Currently we have 1,007 water bodies that require phosphorus measures, and we can pinpoint now where buffer zones or management of ditches can be targeted to break the pathway. And what this has done is significantly reduce that length of channel that we need to target in terms of measures. Also, we need to take into consideration where measures have already been implemented to make sure that the measures are not duplicated. In terms of the maps have been ground truthed by LawPro and ASAP, and we want to thank both organisations for their contribution to that. In terms of nitrogen, we have 535 water bodies that require nitrate measures, and also 18 drinking water supplies that are impacted. We have mapped the critical source areas where nitrate losses are required and we have seen already in particular the impact in the south and the southeast of the country. And again, by targeting these measures, we get multiple benefits in terms of ammonia and greenhouse gas reduction and also water quality. So here is the Blackwater catchment showing the critical source areas that should be targeted for nitrate. So to summarise then, our evidence base is becoming stronger, and this is largely due to collaboration of multiple organisations, allowing our tools to become much more focused. And really that helps us to inform the programme of measures with that evidence base, and allows the programme of measures to ensure that the right measure is targeted in the right place. I would like to thank you all for your attention today, and I would like to thank my colleagues in the EPA and in the other public body organisations that have contributed to today's presentation. Thank you for listening.